32 pieces of legislation, so I'll do a quick report and then I'll address what Karen said. 12 of those pieces of legislation have been moved, ought to pass, one of those in the Senate. So 11 of those are House bills, have gone on to the Senate, awaiting Senate action. One of those is a Senate bill awaiting House action. 5 of them were marked inexpedient to legislate. It's always a sad thing when your bill gets killed, but 5 of them out of 32 I think is a pretty good score. 1 of them have been retained and 13 are awaiting action from either the House or the Senate. Now, these bills include, they're not just changing the name on a post office or anything like that. I went to the legislature to effect change. I went to the legislature hearing from people across my town, my neighbor and others, who tell me their property taxes are so high that they are going to be forced to move out of the house in which they've grown up in, okay? So I proposed, alongside Representative Marjorie Smith, legislation to equalize the valuation of the statewide property tax, which is currently completely unequal and completely inept, where we're essentially getting funding from these poor towns while the rich towns go off essentially scot-free. I was proud to work on passing that legislation last session, last Thursday, 2 Thursdays ago. And unfortunately, there were Democrats on both sides, and it was more of a mix. It wasn't a partisan bill. It was one where people who represent those towns in which they don't have that same tax burden that we do spoke against it, and the ones that have the tax burden, that know what the reality of the people on the ground are going through, spoke for it. Unfortunately, the bill was killed by a 44-seat majority, but I'm proud to have gotten the votes of a number of my Republican colleagues who believe that, no, we shouldn't be raising taxes, but we should at least have a fair tax system in New Hampshire where no town, no person is taxed higher than another. So I was proud on that level. I'm on the House Environment and Agriculture Committee, so we deal with everything from landfills to the food that we eat and the regulations around those. And we were able to get a lot done. We just finished our work this last Tuesday, bipartisanly. I think there was only 2 or 3 pieces of legislation in that committee that came out on a partisan basis. That was cat decline, a ban on glue traps, and one of them that I'm blanking on. Everything else, whether that be making sure that leachate, which is trash juice that's leached from the landfills in our state, absolutely destroying the ground and the water and our ability to live in New Hampshire freely without worrying about what some corporate oligarch is coming down on us with their environmental impact. Bipartisanly, and not everybody on that committee wanted to vote for it, we were able to get some major regulations to landfills passed onto the Senate, and every single member of that committee is working extraordinarily hard to make sure that those landfill regulations pass the Senate and are signed by Governor Ayotte. We've made it so that we've made it, Governor Ayotte in her budget came out with a 1-year moratorium, which means a pause on landfill permitting in this state. The committee came forward with a 3-year moratorium, and so we're in negotiations right now. The fact of the matter is, a moratorium is almost assuredly going to happen. So for us down in southern New Hampshire, that may not matter as much, but for those of us that travel up north, or for those of us that go to Rochester or the other places across this state, it matters a lot to them. Video's in, and we're still trying to figure out Zoom. But the Forest Lake is the lake up in the landfill, which they are currently trying to permit a landfill at. The lake up in the North Country in which they're trying to permit a landfill at. There have been citizens, just like you and I, who on their own dime have waded into that water to test it for cancerous chemicals and have come back to show that the chemicals in that water are extraordinary. So there are some serious problems here in the state of New Hampshire. And yes, I did speak in favor of HB158, and I'm sure we'll get more into that later on. I spoke on HB158 after extensive research, listening to people from all ends of the spectrum, transgender individuals, women, and I came down to the conclusion that HB148, legislation which did not set forth the statewide mandate, legislation which did not impose discrimination, unlike what Representative Hill said, Executive Councilor Hill. The legislation enabled localities, municipalities, and certain sports authorities to put in place specific policies around separation based on sex.
Jonah, your time is up.
Well,
Go ahead.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
This legislation has been labeled discriminatory. I have been labeled a bigot, and I hear all of those. I hear you, and I've read most of the emails. And if you've sent me an email, if you've sent me a phone call, if you've sent me a text message, I will get back to you. There have been thousands of messages and emails and calls, mostly from women who have told me their stories about being unheard, disrespected. Some of them are raising their hands right now, and ignored by the Democratic Party as it currently exists. I stood on the floor. I stood on the floor last Thursday because I listened to those women. Because the legislation respected and heard those women. That legislation was brought forward because of their stories. And yes, as I started my speech, transgender individuals deserve respect. Nobody should be persecuted and based on violence. Nobody should lose their job. If they have gone through decades of being a National Guard member, if they put the time in to be a National Guard member, nobody should be discriminated against based on who they are. Plain and simple. The legislation that I voted on said that women deserve their own spaces. And as I said on the floor, the consent of one cannot stand in the consent of another. So there may be women out there who have no problem. And I accept that and I hear you. But there are also women out there, and this is the last sentence I'll say, I got attacked at the end of the last speech, so I gotta answer it. There are women out there who do care, and I'm listening to those women. And I would not have voted for some statewide prescriptive mandate. The legislation, I hope you read it, enabled authorities, sports authorities, and others to come up with their own. I know, but I got attacked for it, so I'm just going to finish up the sentence.
But it's
to come up with their own policies on this issue. So I'm proud of my speech on Thursday. I researched it for months beforehand, and I understand we'll answer a lot of questions here tonight, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation, hopefully about some of the other important things that New Hampshire is going through.
Okay.
It's great to hear from you, Jonah, but we have very little time and a lot of people, so we want to keep a little bit more to the time limits. Nothing against what you're saying.
Carol.
Okay.
Okay. I think it's clear what happened there.
Okay. So we're going to take questions now, and remember, be as succinct as you can.
Thank you.
Is it on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Dan Gross. I'm a member of the Peterborough Dems Executive Committee. I'm here to read a statement from the Executive Committee. The Committee of the Peterborough Democrats unanimously issues this statement to our elected representatives, Peter Leishman and Jonah Wheeler. As constituents who supported your elections and as representatives of Democratic voters in Peterborough, we must express our deep concern and disapproval of over your recent voting record. In 3 significant instances, your votes have contradicted core democratic principles and interests of the community you represent. On public safety legislation, February 20th, you voted against House Bill 56, which would have established a modest 3-day waiting period for firearm purchases. A common sense measure supported by the vast majority of Democrats. Only 13 Democrats out of 177 in total rejected this public safety bill, and you were among them. On education policy, March 20th, you supported House Bill 10, which despite its framing as supporting parents' rights, effectively creates a chilling effect on educators by criminalizing teachers for potentially violating vaguely defined parental rights. Parental rights are already fully protected by the laws and consequent policies in public schools. This bill imposes costly administrative burdens on our already strained school districts and invites costly, frivolous lawsuits. Only 3 Democrats voted for this bill, including both of you. On civil rights protection, March 20th, most convincing, you voted for House Bill 148, which creates an exception to New Hampshire's civil rights protections, specifically allowing discrimination against transgender individuals, citing unsubstantiated claims of fears by women who feel their space may be infringed upon, ignoring the more significant and prevalent fears that transgender individuals struggle with. You were the only 2 Democrats who supported this bill that undermines our party's fundamental commitment to equal rights and protections for all citizens. While we respect your rights to vote your conscience, our conscience compels us to publicly voice our opposition to your actions.
Can I get my answer, or? You just,
Oh, it's a struggle.
well, all I would say is I hope you would call me next time before writing up a statement and make it in front of the public, that's all.
You represent us, we don't represent
How about those of
you.
us who wrote you and called you and texted you? How about those?
A lot of people got a response.
All right, let's keep to the format, thank you.
Good evening. Thank you,
Dick,
Madam
yes.
Moderator. My name is Richard McNamara. I'm a resident of Peterborough. My title was at one time the Honorable Richard McNamara because I was a member of the General Court for 6 years. I was a state rep, and I represented 5 of the towns in the Conval district, not Peterborough at that time. I wasn't living in here in Peterborough. I would like to say that I went to the website that has the listing of the laws, all the laws that govern what happens in New Hampshire. And I downloaded in 1998, the Trade and Commerce Committee set up the State Commission for Human Rights. The paragraph, the introductory paragraph here is quite extensive. I'll read the last sentence in this paragraph. In addition, the agencies, councils so created shall exercise their authority to assure that no person is discriminated against on the account of sexual orientation. I also downloaded the bill, and it's very difficult to, even though I was in the legislature, to find the RSAs. You may want to look at these sometimes. And I looked at the sponsors. Some of these sponsors are people I sat with when I was in the legislature. I left in 2018. Frankly, I sat on committees with some of these people. I sat them in Representatives Hall with some of these people. And I can say that this list is made up of people who are hardcore libertarians, free staters, and people, I think, who don't have the interest of all people in New Hampshire in their bailiwick. They're mostly, they want freedom, but only for themselves, not for you and I. So, I think it would be interesting if you read that bill. I would like to say almost 10 years ago, I attended my 50th college reunion.
Is there a question? I thought we were in the Q&A.
Well, I'm getting to a question here, and I stayed in the dorm.
statements as well.
Okay, well, the dorm had bathrooms where I stayed. Signs in the bathrooms, they said they could be used by anyone. I spoke to one of the faculty members. I said, "Has this been a problem at the college?" He says, "We never had an issue in all the years that we've had bathrooms open to all people." I would like to say, Mr. Wheeler, you can comment on this, that, as I said, I can still use the title as honorable, and I would think, looking at your voting record, I won't go into it because it was mentioned by this gentleman, is that maybe you want to change your title from a Democrat to a Republican, because the Democrat.
Respond? He said I could.
Yeah.
Okay. I am a Democrat. Really, I mean, I don't know how to respond to that last 6 minutes. I mean, you brought up 3 different pieces of legislation, then didn't give me a chance to respond. And now you're attacking me, calling me a Republican because I gave a speech on the House floor. Listen to my speech, people. Thank you. I did not attack anybody, and I didn't go after anybody, and I'm certainly not a Republican. Unlike some of my colleagues on the floor, on both sides of the issue, on both sides of many issues, I tried to find compassion in this fight. And I'm not going to attack the members or sponsors of a certain bill because they are on another side as me. Frankly, I think the fact that we've divided ourselves so much to where we would say, oh, look at the sponsor on that bill, has ruined the conversation. So vote me out. Do whatever you want to me. But let's move past these divisive conversations and try to have a real conversation about the legislation.
Equal time. Let's be clear. Project 2025 is being enacted at the federal level, and there is equally an attempt to enact Project 2025 at the state level. This is about a racist, misogynist, homophobic, transphobic, xenophobic agenda that is being implemented at the federal and at the state level. And it's coming through in many ways. I'm seeing it at the executive council table. We are seeing it in the legislature. I think it is extremely important. I think it's very encouraging to see so many people who are here tonight, because the way that democracy works is when people show up and they hold their legislators and their elected officials accountable for the decisions that they make. Thank you.
Okay, do you want to speak?
I would love to, thank you. I do have something I prepared. Where should I stand? Right here. Okay, awesome. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Jane. I have come here specifically to address the House Bill 148, and additionally, if I have time, I will also have some thoughts about Bill 10 as well. I know you wanted to talk about legislation, so let's talk about legislation, Jonah. You remember me? We grew up together. Our parents were roommates, actually. And more recently, we spoke when you were running for the House seat that you sit in currently. And while you were running, I urged you as a friend to do everything in your power to push back against the anti-trans rhetoric and stop bills like these from passing. And you promised me that you would fight for us. And I was excited to vote for you. I was excited to elect a childhood friend into the House of Representatives, to have someone who I once considered family fighting to keep me and my community safe. I was proud when you won, you gave me hope, and then you stabbed me in the back. It's really funny. The way I see it, you're either a liar who scammed your constituents and your friends to get your seat, or you're a coward who abandoned your morals because you're afraid to hurt the feelings of the fascists that you claim to be fighting against. And your complacency is cooperation with fascism.
Yeah.
Last year, you spoke on House Bill 619, another anti-trans bill, right before voting in favor of it. Do you remember your words, Jonah?
I do.
You said, the only argument against the bill is that it specifically opens up the door to more bad trans bills. But then you said, the slippery slope fallacy I don't think applies here. And yet here we are a year later, and you seem to be going out of your way to make that slope even more slippery.
What is your question?
I'll get there. Now, regarding House Bill 148, the bill that will force trans women to be held in men's prisons and ban us from going pee in public or something like that, there is no evidence at all that suggests that trans women pose a greater danger to cis women compared to other groups. The basis of this bill is entirely and factually unsupported by every statistic, okay? The proposed bill will force transgender men, a community that the entire government seems to have forgotten exists, to use women's restrooms, which will cause greater confusion and greater discomfort for everybody. Over 90% of sexual assaults are perpetrated by cisgender men, and most of them occur with people that the victims know. So I do want to talk about one case where a woman was harassed in a bathroom, because it does happen, and the perpetrator might not be who you folks are expecting. Kalea Morton, a 19-year-old cisgender woman in Arizona, was intruded on by 2 male police officers while using a restroom because a Walmart employee assumed she was a transgender woman, which she was not. She was interrogated by the male officers in the bathroom, who insisted that she looked like a man, forcing the woman to feel obligated to expose herself to the armed male officers. So,
Please wrap it up.
I will wrap it up, thank you. Are we really going to pretend that having men fully armed with guns storming into women's bathrooms and interrogating every girl with a butch-looking haircut, that's somehow going to make women feel safer? And do we really believe that using the police to do genital inspections is a good use of taxpayer money at a time when eggs cost $7 a carton?
The legislation didn't mandate genital inspections, and it didn't mandate a bathroom policy.
Yeah, well, in Arizona, it didn't mandate it either, but that woman was still violated by the police.
Let him
Not
answer.
Arizona.
You're not, you're from the fucking news.
Excuse me.
Yeah, no swearing, okay? I know you're
Apologies for
angry.
my language.
The legislation enabled certain authorities to put in place those policies, and to the one who spoke before about UNH, Mr. McNamara, nobody's saying those policies have to change. If UNH likes those policies, then UNH can use those policies. That's what HB158 did. The legislation enabled localities, sports authorities, and other entities to put in place policies that they saw fit around separation.
How do you
based
feel
off-
about trans
Can I
women
finish?
being sent to men's
Can I
prisons?
finish?
You have to,
I actually would have defended you to Carol, because other people were able to give longer statements than you, and I think that you should have been able to give your statement and say your piece.
Would you like me to finish? I'd love to finish.
I think you did get to finish.
No, I actually still had another,
That's
another
okay.
thing I wanted to
Well,
mention.
can I?
It's Jonah's turn.
Can I speak?
it's okay.
All right. So again, the legislation enabled certain authorities to put in place certain policies around the separation based off of sex. I hear the stories of people who are transgender who are being attacked. And I hear the stories of butch women who are being attacked based off of their appearance. Nobody should be attacked based off of their appearance. In fact, masculinity, femininity, these things are not as, you can be masculine and be a feminine person. You can be feminine and be a masculine person. Doesn't matter, actually, to me. And you can do whatever you feel fit. But your rights end when the rights of another's begin. And government is about the balance between rights. It's about the balance between the minority and the majority. So I hear the minority, and then I'm also listening to the majority of women out there who, one of the men up here said, there are stories that, unfounded stories. Tell me out here, how many women have unfounded stories? Yeah, there's plenty of hands up with unfounded stories. Unfounded stories. Was I supposed to just listen to those women and label them all as transphobic? Well, that's not a way, that's not something that I'm going to do. That's not something I'm going to do. Women's spaces need to be respected, and the consent of one needs to be respected with the consent of another.
So what is it?
I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Just as a reminder, the addition of gender identity to the New Hampshire Human Rights Law, the anti-discrimination law, was passed was signed into law by Governor Sununu. It was a bipartisan effort. New Hampshire has been at the front lines of anti-discrimination, and that's something that we can really be proud of as our state. And I was very proud when we added gender identity as a protected class in 2018. In fact, when this exact bill, HB158, this exact bill, passed the House and the Senate last year or the year before, it was vetoed by Governor Sununu. One of the reasons that Governor Sununu gave for that was exactly the concern that you raised about the inmates in our correctional facilities and the likelihood, the testimony that was given by our Commissioner of Corrections in the state of New Hampshire, that this law will result in increased violence to trans women in New Hampshire prisons. And that is why I think Governor Sununu did the right thing to veto it. I sincerely hope that if this bill passes the New Hampshire Senate and goes on to the governor, that Governor Ayotte will also veto it.
There's so many people here, we have to give everyone a chance. If you want to say like 30 seconds.
Yeah,
but
30
that's it.
seconds, literally just 30
That's it.
seconds. I don't
All
even
right.
need a microphone. I just wanted to add that there was a Supreme Court case in 1994 involving a transgender woman who was held in a general population male prison, and the officers there allowed her to be raped by another inmate. The 8th Amendment of the Constitution states that no incarcerated person shall face cruel or unusual punishment. And in that Supreme Court case, Farmer v. Brennan, the Supreme Court ruled that deliberate indifference to a substantial risk of serious harm to an inmate violates the cruel and unusual punishment clause of the 8th Amendment. So by voting to move transgender women to male prisons, knowing full well that they will likely be raped or killed, is in fact a direct violation of the Constitution.
But they're putting-
And that
Okay,
is
thank you.
disgrace.
We have-
But they're putting them in men's prisons anyway.
All right.
Okay,
You know how
wait,
many
next.
men get raped in men's prison?
They're putting-
Hold on, she's got the microphone.
Wait.
She's got the microphone.
Let her talk.
I want to thank you, Jonah, for what you stand for. Amen. Yes, I'm Claudia Stewart, I'm a Republican, and I'm from Ridge. And I want to thank you for the stand that you've taken. I appreciate the fact that despite being ostracized by your fellow Democrats, you stood your ground for what you morally believe is correct. And if anybody actually listened to his speech, he was not blanketly saying that anybody's rights should be taken away. I appreciate him listening to women and being supportive of the issues that we've gone through. Where is the Me Too now?
Right.
Everybody was trying to And so I want to tell you that if there's anything that you need help with for running again, I would be more than happy to help you. And I would like to ask you my question, which is, are you going to let this hateful behavior that's being expressed toward you stop you from continuing to be the honest and upright person that you are?
I have a year and a half left in the legislature, and I plan on using it, okay? The Democratic caucus, let's make one thing clear based off of what Dan said. The Democratic caucus, 170 members voted against this bill, only 13 voted against. Let's talk about what the legislature is like. You want to talk about this? Let's talk about the legislature. The Democratic caucus has 2 caucuses before they vote on the House floor. Those caucuses, one of which is on Zoom, where they go through, this week we have 150 bills on our House calendar that we have to act on. So in that Democratic caucus, they will go through each of those bills slowly and surely, even if it has the unanimous vote. And then we have, again, 1 hour Zoom, strict 1 hour Zoom, to go through all of these bills and to hear from the ranking members, the leaders, what their position on the bill was. And then, at the end, we get 5 minutes to ask questions. So, the idea that Democrats who vote a certain way, and I know there were at least 30 who planned on joining me on this piece of legislation, were voting their conscience is silly and lacks a basic understanding of how the legislature works. And I'm fighting so hard to make the mechanics of the legislature work again, to make the mechanics of the Democratic caucus work again, to where we can debate, to where we can have full-throated conversations just like this, and where we can come out of that room as a team to work against what is fascism in the truest sense of the word, where corporations and the state merge, okay? That's not one party or the other. That's both parties. Look at the donors of the Democratic Party nationally. Look at the donors of the Democratic Party statewide. Why is Ray Buckley still our state chairman? Because we live in a corrupt party. So, can I finish? That's all I had to say. The Democratic caucus is completely messed up.
Thank you, Jonah.
My name is Mary Boltway, and I have been a public school educator in this community for nearly 20 years. I do have a question for you. Don't respond right away, because I'm not going to get lost in this. My question is, do you understand the ripple effect that your actions have on vulnerable people? And I am saying that, Jonah, as someone who has been in your corner almost as long as I've been a teacher. I sat across from you and you talked about how you wanted to go to Boys State. I proudly voted for you, and I am ashamed of what you have done out in the world. I have cared for you, but Jane is my student too. This room is full of people you are actively hurting, and I don't know how you sleep at night.
I sleep just fine. Having done my research, and having voted on the bill as it was written. Let me say this without clapping, without anything else, because there are people in this room who I've known for a long time who are coming up here to say really powerful things to me. I don't know how I'm supposed to respond to that, because it's not...
Maybe just listen. Don't respond. Just listen.
She asked me a question, Sarah. You're screaming at me, Sarah. Why are you screaming at me? Why can't we have a conversation about this issue in a coordinated and coherent way?
I thought you wanted to listen to women.
These claps after somebody says something when I'm just trying to respond. I mean, would you rather I just sit here and not talk? You guys are yelling out listening session. You are asking questions.
Struggle session.
Elizabeth has a question.
I am really confused, and I came here to get clarity, and I haven't gotten it yet. Oh, I'm sorry. Is that good? Okay. I'm still confused, and this is a simple question. I was going to call you and chat with you, but I couldn't. I just want to know why, when there are so many people in this room who are clearly upset about your decision, and I think you know your constituents. I believe that you do. Why did you vote in a manner that would upset us so? Because I don't understand how somebody can vote their conscience if they're an elected official. I thought, and I could be wrong, that you voted for your constituents. And I'm not being snarky. I really want to know. I want to know, do the people we elect vote their conscience, or do they vote for their constituents? And that's my only question, and that's why I'm here. That's what I want to know.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for asking that in a respectful way. I'm happy to answer. I voted for this legislation knowing, yes, that it would be controversial, and that's why I gave my speech, is because I wanted to try to explain my constituents why, after the research, after extensive listening to both sides, I would do what I did. So like I said on the floor, I could have taken a walk, which means leaving the chamber, not voting. It's frowned upon. I could have voted with the party, which would have been against what I knew to be right based off of what I had heard from women. Again, this comes down to, for me, I hear from the people on this side. I also hear from the people on this side who say that their consent, their voice, and their opinion has been shot down just like this. I voted the way that I did, Elizabeth, because I did represent my constituents. Because there were women in this town who told me that they don't feel safe in their spaces anymore. Again, despite what this crowd might say, I'm supposed to just label all those women as transphobic? These are Democratic women who have been called a Republican. We're thinking of people that we both know right here, who have been called a Republican. People who have fought so hard the last 20 years, some of them formerly elected women officials in the Democratic Party, who came to me and said, the Democratic Party is ignoring me on this issue. They've called me a Republican. They're going out calling me fascist sympathizers. I couldn't just ignore those women. And that's why I voted the way I did.
I think some of those women are actually called TERFs.
No.
Trans-exclusionary radical. I'll be brief because I know that everyone obviously wants to talk to Jonah and share their feelings with him, but I think as one of your elected officials, it's important for me to also share that I am motivated by my conscience as well. And so when I serve you, when I represent you on the Executive Council, that is why one of the things that I have done is not just do my job as an executive counselor, I also have chosen to testify in the legislature on important pieces of legislation. It's why I testified against HB 10 and against HB158. I put 50,000 miles on my car running for executive council in District 2, around 81 cities and towns, and I know my district very well, and I spent a lot of time here in Peterborough, and I feel very strongly that I am carrying your values and representing your values in Concord, and I am proud to do that.
Representative Wheeler, my name is Corey Cohn, and I am trans. And first of all, I want to say it can't be easy to stand in front of a room full of people who are yelling and upset. So first of all, I appreciate your composure. I've been all around this country speaking with Democrats on these contentious issues, and I can tell you that I've met hundreds of Democrats who feel alienated and driven out from the Democratic Party because their voices are not being heard, women. So my question for you is, when did the lake of women's rights dry up and become a pond that only concerned reproductive rights and all of their rights, their spaces, their sports, their activities, their privileges? When did these things go by the sideline? And what can you do as a national leader to help bring the Democratic Party back to reality?
Thank you. And let me just first say thank you for praising my composure, but let me just say, I'm an elected official, and you're elected as a punching bag. 24/7, 5 days a week, punching bag. And I'm here to take it. So as much as you have to give, I'm here to take it. And as much as you want us to say, I'm here to take the phone call, I'm here to take the message, absolutely. So that's where my composure comes from, is from genuinely willing to stand in front of my constituents, even when I disagree with them, even knowing when it's going to be unpopular, because that's what the job of an elected official is. Now, in terms of how to save the Democratic Party, I don't know what one state representative can do to save the Democratic Party, but what I do know is that each and every one of you, I see Ahmed up here, I see people out here who are fighting for health care, I see people who are fighting for their rights, I see people who are fighting for retirement. How do we save the Democratic Party? Let's start talking to each other. Let's start getting out there and conversing with one another. Let's start treating each other as human beings with compassion rather than yelling and screaming and, how do you sleep at night? That Democratic attitude, that attitude of the Democratic Party, and it isn't just pointed towards you, but it's something that I've gotten. I don't
It's a
mean,
direct quote.
well, it was pointed at you, but it wasn't just pointed at you. It's something that I've heard a lot. And I think it's something that we need to stop saying, because the moral line of purity that's been drawn by the Democratic Party, I think, is the result and why this party has atrophied so much over the course of the last 20 years.
Thank you, John.
Now our response.
So I think one of the real challenges right now is that this discussion about women's spaces and women's safety in bathrooms is distracting from the real dangers that women face. As someone who has experienced domestic violence as both a child and as an adult, I can tell you firsthand that it was not in public bathrooms that I was unsafe. It was in my family. It was in my home. And I think it's really important that when we talk about women's safety, that we don't that we don't put it into this one category. It's a distraction when the real violence that women are facing, the real dangers to women are typically the cis men in their lives. And we need to do something about it.
Yeah, hi. My name is Seth Chatfield. I live in Peterborough. Jonah, you asked what you could do. I guess what I would ask you is if you're willing to accept responsibility for the number of children who statistically will commit suicide because they've been forced outed to their parents in school, or because they've been denied freedom to inhabit the gender, not sex, but the gender, which is a different thing, which you maybe should read a little more about, to inhabit that gender authentically, to be themselves. Because there is a large statistical number of children who will commit suicide as a result of legislation like the stuff that you have forward. And I'm wondering if you're willing to take responsibility from that as you stand up here and talk about how hard it is to be in the legislature. Try being in the world as a person who is not cisgender. That's all I have to say, and I'd like to turn it over to the
I think that's a great point. I just heard from somebody in the audience. I think it's absolutely, to go around and ascribe the deaths of all those who would commit suicide to me, I think is a dangerous way to go about this. I really do.
You know suicide after they've rendered themselves infertile. Oh, sorry. Decorum. Sorry.
All right, let's have one at a time, one at a time. You make your answer. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Jonah. I'm one of many people here who's known Jonah a long time. I'm going to ask a pretty quick and simple question. There are some people here, I'm sure he'll love this. Stephen Scare, right there. And all these people with the little pins on, without the trans colors, the progress. Like, what's your group that you're here with, Stephen? LGBT?
Courage Coalition.
Courage Coalition. And Stephen has actually personally attacked me, friends of yours who you knew from high school, with transphobic, homophobic, bigoted attacks. I've seen them protesting at Manchester Pride, and this group is dedicated to eradicating transgender people from the LGBT
Not at
community.
all. They're based on evidence-based medicine.
They can argue against me all they like. I would like you specifically, without wibbly-wobbling about it, to condemn these people who hate transgender people, who want to make it illegal for them to transition. I'd like you to condemn him specifically because he came here to support you, and to condemn Breitbart News, Fox News, and the other right-wing news outlets that have profited off of your speech that you made in the State House.
I didn't know we were going to just be attacking people in the audience.
You did the same thing when you locked those people up
mocking them, and that's not what an elected official is.
Okay.
Breitbart, did we just condemn Breitbart?
Yeah.
Or Fox News?
No, I'm actually going to reject your question because I think it's, if you guys really think that because of my speech on the floor that I'm some right-wing fascist, I mean, that's crazy. I have I'm just a useful idiot. I'm a puppet, I'm a useful idiot. I don't know what I'm talking about, and I don't know what else to say. I condemn anybody who goes around and spews hate. Anybody who spews hate.
Okay, we're gonna have to wrap it up in a few minutes. So I hope we can become, what? Yeah. Would you like to speak?
I have
Oh,
a
okay.
microphone. I'm not used to doing this. This
Oh,
is
come on,
probably
Linda.
the first time, it is, it's the first time I've spoken politically to a huge group. I do have two questions. I am a moderate Democrat who actually just registered as an independent last fall. When I first heard about on the national level, it really breaks my heart to see this come down to Peterborough. The hate that's going on nationally from the Trump administration, it's filtering down, and it's really sad to see. When I started hearing about all this national stuff about transgender people, I was like, well, how many transgender people are there in the U.S.? I thought 50% of our population was transgender. My God, you were gonna take us over, right? We get 75.
There's like 12 of us in the whole state.
Well, so I looked up the statistics. It's approximately 1% of the population, and they have been made out to be the scapegoats by Trump. I don't understand it because I've not had that experience with anybody I know except superficially, but I think you and what's his name who's not here, Peter, that you are falling into that net of making transgender people the enemy. They are not the enemy.
Do you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Please.
Well, actually, I said the answer to my question because I was going to say, do you know how many transgender people are in the U.S.? My other question is related to the parental rights bill. Now, I have mixed feelings about that, but I was reading it today, and it said that parents have the right to refuse vaccines. I don't know how the hell that got into the parental rights bill when you're supposed to have, your kids are supposed to be vaccinated to go to public school, but but yet the far right people want to deny parents the right to make decisions about their children who are under 18 and think they are transgender. That to me is a contradiction. I don't understand how you could support that aspect of allowing people on the right to make decisions about their children, but denying people on the left the ability to make decisions about their children who might be trans. So that is my question.
Thank you. The answer,
Oh, you're next, and then we're gonna end. Okay.
the answer to your question is I would ask you to point to one time where I have vilified transgender people. The legislation, and I'll say it again, HB158,
Right now, buddy, you're a vote.
Okay,
Okay, please, let's keep it quiet. I understand you feel strongly, but let's let him talk.
The legislation, HB158, heard stories from women. I guess I'm supposed to label all of you guys as TERFs. I don't even really know what that means. But the women who came to me to say, not about transgender people, but about their spaces. What was I supposed to do? Not listen to them? Ignore them? I guess the answer for some is yes. The answer for me is no. Okay, I'm not going to ignore those women. I have no illusions that Donald Trump spent some $500 million on television ads about transgender people. None. No illusions at all. And the effect of that is what I keep wanting to demote you. Was what Councilor Hill said about the National Guard member. Okay, and nobody, as I said beginning, nobody should be discriminated against based off of who they are.
Say it one more time for the people in the back.
But that means the two are not mutually exclusive. We can respect transgender women and we can respect the rights of women who happen to disagree about their spaces.
Transgender women are women.
You guys did a great job. Yeah, no, I know, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
All right, let me say, it's after, we need another hour to get everybody on the questions. And we have one more person, and then we're gonna end. I know everybody has strong feelings, and I appreciate your being here, but we have to just chill a little bit more. Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Simon. I am a bisexual. I am a lifelong liberal. I once considered myself a progressive, but that movement has since eschewed me. I am Jewish, and I've been born and raised here in New England. I have a question for the councilwoman. And first of all, I want to say thank you, Jonah, for doing this. I look forward to voting for you in a future presidential election. I believe we have the next Here's my question. Councilwoman, given your support for the castration of children like me under the guise of so-called gender-affirming care, what would you say to the parents of detransitioners who took their own lives after realizing this so-called gender-affirming care was actually the wrong decision? And in fact, here in New Hampshire, we have at least 100, and I can send you statistics if you want, children who have been operated on and given cross-sex hormones, which do sterilize after long enough use.
Transgender surgeries have a lower regret rate than knee surgery.
That's a lie. That's a lie.
That's not
Thank you for the question. Quiet, please. Thank you for the question. To be clear, the executive counselors do not get to vote on legislation. So there has been legislation passed, HB158 last year, that had to do with gender-affirming care. I did not get a vote on that. Your representative Wheeler and Leishman, your representatives, did get to vote on that, and they voted with the anti-trans position on that legislation as well.
Please answer the question.
Answer the question, yeah.
Answer the question. What would you say to the parent of a detransitioner, like who I've known, my friends who are
Like our
dead, because they
detransitioners here.
regret what they have done to their bodies? What would you say to those parents?
I would say to the parent of anyone who lost a child, I am very sorry for your loss.
And then are you going to stop? Are you going to stop supporting this? This is the next opioid crisis.
I've answered the question.
Keep talking.
Karen doesn't have control over that.
Anyway,
This is
Let me just
actually,
say,
Let's make some closing remarks.
I want to say we're over time, and I want to thank everyone for coming, and I'm sorry we couldn't extend this further, because...
but thank you all for coming out. No matter what side you're on, this is what politics needs to be. Conversing with respect, and let me just say finally, that if your position needs to shoot people down with yelling at them over as they speak, or clapping at them as they speak, or calling them a fascist, I'm not sure if your position is the right one. Positions that are the right ones can win based off of merit, based off of the argument. And you know what I didn't hear tonight is a merit-based argument.